Very nice to have all of you here. Looks like a very familiar crowd. So thank you for joining us in this Fireside chat. We all know how Fireside chat started as a way to bring messages in a comfortable way to the audience. So that's what we're going to do today. I've known actually Simon for a few years already.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I would claim a little bit of credit in saying it was through the Singapore Space and Technology Association's work that inspired him to pursue a rocket scientist dream here.
Well, absolutely, yes. SSTA was instrumental. I began by volunteering for them for some events. I got in touch with more people in the industry this way, and I got to learn from them. So this whole process fine-tuned our idea in what to actually do with the space industry.
Maybe Simon, I know you well, but maybe tell the audience a little bit about you and where you come from and what you're trying to do.
All right, so I am still an undergraduate at NUS, doing project and facilities management. So that's not exactly rocket science, but there are some skill sets which can be transplanted. And we started Equatorial Space last year as a launch service provider. So we are dealing with rocket propulsion developments, and we aspire to be the first company to conduct launch operations from Southeast Asia. Hence the name, Equatorial. Makes sense, right?
So you're working and you're studying at the same time?
Yes, unfortunately.
Oh. So how's your team like? What's the makeup of your team? Are they all your college room dorm friends?
Right, so we actually started with our college hostel friends. Over time, the team evolved and we got more and more senior members. We got some engineers with experience. And at this point, majority of us are, whilst we are still on voluntary basis, we are actually made up of postgraduates mostly.
So what is the biggest challenge that you face today?
Funding. Yes, rockets don't necessarily blow up, okay? They can earn money, so consider investing in rocket systems.
What kind of ticket size are you looking for?
Ticket size, we're looking at between 2 and 3 million, and that will give you orbital capability. That's the best value for money you can get in this industry.
And I guess there's good traction in going towards that direction and seeking funding.
Yes, we have more and more interest, so that's very encouraging. We have a prototype firing coming up next month, and that should give our prospective investors some extra confidence in our own capability as an R&D outfit.
And Simon, what kind of skill sets are you looking for as you expand and build up your team?
So skill set is very diverse in rocketry because you're dealing with mechanical engineering, with chemical engineering, with computer science, with software. So we're looking for people who have, ideally, with experience in avionics, in guidance systems, in material science, and basically mechanical engineering. That's the baseline. That's most applicable throughout all those different disciplines that rocketry is made of.
So just, we're in Slush, Singapore. I want to ask you, how hard is it to carve a niche in the space industry startup in Singapore?
Well, it's fun, but it's also very challenging. Lots of people don't really have much exposure to space industry. It's changing gradually, and especially in terms of rocketry, it's difficult to find people who have enough the expertise to evaluate our project, to assist with that. We had to look overseas for some additional support. But that said, I think there's quite a lot of potential support that's actually showing up. So over time, it's getting more and more, people are warming up to the idea of having a Singapore-based rocket startup.
Yes, I think we've increasingly starting to establish ourselves as a base for new space activities, and the kind of rockets that we're looking at as well would not be the conventional, big rockets that takes up to 5, 6, 7 tons of satellite. And that's one of SSTA, the Singapore Space and Technology Association's mandate as well, to really increase the awareness and drive the association between high-tech companies in Singapore and being able to give them the access to funding. But I have to echo your sentiments. People don't naturally associate Singapore with a rocket. We were never in the Cold War race. We don't have a legacy of trying to put the first man or first flag on the moon. So therein lies a bit of a challenge in getting people to accept that this is a niche that we can put our claim to. But I'm very proud of you, Simon, doing a job in that. But so you're slowly seeing the changes, but what more can be done here for you?
I think especially the regulatory aspect is still quite behind the curve right now. There's been a lot of government support for satellite projects. Ultimately, satellite systems are quite directly related to electronics and semiconductors, which Singapore is very strong with historically. But, I mean, for rocketry, you require some testing space. It's quite difficult to secure this kind of space in Singapore, but there could be ways in which government can help out. I think it's going to take some more time before they accept that we are here to stay and we are not joking. But let's give it another 6 months to see how it goes.
So how do you manage to maintain the drive when you enter the industry where funding is a key to move forward?
Well, as a Singaporean, it's good to have dreams, more realistic than home ownership. So I guess that's what's keeping me going.
I need to do a shameless plug for Simon here. He's a multi-hyphenate. He's not only an undergraduate, a space technopreneur trying to build rockets, he also imports Polish beer to Singapore.
Yes, if anyone is interested, find me afterwards. It's fully legit.
And are you targeting CubeSats or larger sets, or is there a roadmap to go into various sizes of satellites?
Okay, so for now we are focusing on CubeSats. That's the natural entry point for a new launch company, just because of the payload size is so small. But of course, heavier satellites require heavier launch mass. So the whole logistics become increasingly complicated. It's basically a whole different ballgame. But there is a very quickly growing market for CubeSat launching, for dedicated services, for CubeSats, for microsats, and that is where we want to be first. Of course, we do want to move into heavier payloads. My personal aspiration is to go into orbital tourism as soon as possible, but that's going to take some time. And I think for any new launch company, that's really the logical first step.
So would you say it's in the technical difficulties, maybe in manpower or funding?
Okay, so technology, I mean, it's difficult. Of course, the term rocket science came from something, so it's difficult, but there's nothing you can't solve with a little bit of grit and a little bit of determination. Expertise-wise, well, luckily there's LinkedIn. If you don't know something, chances are you can connect with someone who does know how to solve a problem. And that's what happened to us quite a few times already. Funding, I would say, is probably the thing which is still most critical, because once you have enough resources, you can solve any problem, really. It's just a matter of how much can you get.
So are you interested in the topic of reducing space waste?
Absolutely. I think it's critical. So firstly, we're designing our vehicle to leave as little debris behind it as possible. So it's not just the big pieces. The big pieces are easy to control and monitor. It's every bolt and nut and screw that can fall off during launch, especially during staging, that can be troublesome. And after staging, when you're actually in orbit, because it no longer deorbits itself. At some altitudes anyway. So from our side, we're doing our best to reduce that problem. And of course, we'll be happily working with companies such as Astroscale to offer services to them for space debris collection.
So there's a speech by Nobu, the founder of Astroscale, who is in the space sweeping business, and he will be at the main stage next door. So I have a question, and I think I gave you some heads up. What if you fail?
I'll start again.
Excellent. And how do you manage your studies and startup?
A lot of coffee and a lot of beer.
Polish beer.
Oh, that too, yes.
How will you navigate the regulatory issues when launching your first satellite?
All right, so the easiest way is to test flight from somewhere with the regulations already in place. So we may flight-proof our vehicle, maybe in the United States, maybe in Australia, someplace that it's not so challenging. This way we can prove our own technology to regulators in Southeast Asia. Because ultimately, the name Equatorial Space came from the region, and from the value proposition of offering equatorial launch services alongside with other inclinations.
And when can we expect your first launch?
All right, so first flight, well, fingers crossed, we are hoping for a suborbital mission by the end of March, if things go very well. And our aspirations are to do an orbital launch by the end of next year. The vehicle is pretty small, the technology is already underway, and we are working on some extra additions to our, especially our guidance and navigation systems.
So we're looking at quite a few updates from you over the next 12 months, which is very exciting. Yeah.
Yes, we'll do our best to deliver on time.
So this is an interesting question. Can you share more on the nanosatellites landscape and how do big companies and startups fit in, I guess coexist, and what are the applications you're striving for?
Okay, so there are satellites, I mean all of satellites, regardless of their class, are really about two things, collecting data or transmitting data. And nanosatellites do exactly that. And the two niches which are particularly useful is IoT communications and Earth imaging. Instead of having one quality image of a particular location in the world every couple of days maybe, you would be able to have it every few hours or every 1 hour even, or even more often if you have a properly distributed constellation of smaller satellites. So for IoT, the very attractive proposition is, especially for countries with less GSM coverage, with either which are geographically very distributed or not as developed, or with a lot of basically undeveloped areas.
Like Indonesia, very big landmass, as islands.
That's right. Although some developed countries also have pretty spotty coverage, and agriculture, mining, forestry, disaster response could be very. Could use improved coverage and improved connectivity in those areas.
And let's go to linking to the last questions. Where would your rockets be launched? Ocean, is that viable?
Okay, so we are trying to get approval to launch it from South China Sea, which will take some time, especially considering how congested that entire area is, and that's one of our value propositions. We are working on methods to reduce the necessary airspace restrictions, as well as offer more punctual launch services. There are many companies which are offering small launch right now or planning to do so soon, but we are specifically working on making that as punctual as possible, which is also going to be to improve our standing with the aerospace regulations. But more realistically, we'll have to start from some other areas, possibly Indonesia, possibly Philippines. I'm familiar with their efforts to establish a space agency over there. And as I was saying, for the first test flight, or a couple of them, we may look beyond Asia. And the upcoming DARPA challenge in the United States next year is a great opportunity for us, and we are doing our best to catch that bandwagon.
Yeah, very, very good. Going to the DARPA challenge, we're supporting
not yet,
you. Yeah.
trying to.
Right, okay.
Let's not jinx it.
There, yeah. So, and to this question here, do you think you're coming in a bit too late in this game? Okay,
so we are on the second wave of small launchers. The first one would be Rocket Lab, Gilmour Space, who else? Virgin Orbit, Vector. But that doesn't mean that we are necessarily disadvantaged. In fact, we can learn from many of their previous experiences and save ourselves a lot of time and a lot of technological challenges. There is some joint experience to be had, and at the same time, we did get to learn the shortcomings of existing solutions, which we can adapt in the second wave of small launch capability. Specifically, that's about punctuality. Rocket Lab has the production backline figured out. They have the regulatory permissions, but they are suffering from pretty serious delays. And I mean, imagine waiting 4 months for your plane, having a delay of 4 months. I mean, after 4 hours, we already lose our minds. And I think the same has to be solved for launch services.
Very well said, Simon. I think this is a game where it's not about first mover advantage. There is rarely a value in such a technically rigorous industry to move first. And there's always a lot of trial and error in this industry. I don't think it's an issue of coming too late. I think it's an issue of having the best product and getting it at the right price point for market adoption.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So where do you start when trying to build a space-oriented startup?
Okay, so...
You start by attending GSTC.
Yes. Actually, even earlier, I was crashing one of the Singapore Space Challenge events.
That's right.
That's where I met Terence sitting right over there. And I got in touch with SSTA, and I basically got to learn from people who were involved with it and who are attending events. I read a few books on the technology along the way. And I have to admit here in front of everybody, Kerbal Space Program helped.
I've heard that many times. My kid's going to be playing it very soon. I've downloaded it already.
It's a very, very good place.
It is.
Very educative.
However, in a small country, how is it possible to grow a space agency? We've got many tall buildings. The agency will go into a building, for sure.
Of course. I mean, we don't need to have our own launch site to run a space agency. Many small countries around the world have their own space agencies. Luxembourg, for instance. They are being very innovative in terms of many upcoming space applications within the industry. And for Singapore's case, I mean, especially in our context, when it comes to launching, I think it will be inevitable for ASEAN countries to collaborate together on a space agency which would coordinate the regulatory landscape in the region. A long shot, definitely, but I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be possible.
So maybe something similar to the ESA formula, European Space Agency.
Exactly, yes.
Yes. Are you hiring? Which profile?
Okay, so we're not paying anybody yet. We are all volunteers. If you're interested, you can go to our website and drop us a message at contact.equatorialspace.com. We're looking at a variety of people who are willing to help out, but especially those with engineering and physics and chemistry backgrounds would be very welcome. But that said, we do have people who are from completely different fields, so don't get discouraged, and just drop us an email.
You need some finance analyst, to schmooze your investors as well.
That could help. Of course, yes. In fact, I'm planning to speak to some investors later today, so hopefully we will be able to pay people sometime soon.
We're really proud of what Simon is trying to do here. From SSTA, we are advocating all the same thing, a lot more business activities, good signs, and having money in the industry to grow it and really plant our flag in the space developments in Asia Pacific. So we're very happy to have Simon doing this. And coming out at such an early stage to share his experiences with all of us is very admirable. So this question here, what is the name of the game again?
What do you mean by that?
So that's why I tossed it to you.
Well, name of the company, that would be Equatorial Space, of course. Let me try to interpret that my way. So what's the big picture, I suppose? Is that what the question is asking? Okay, if that is the case, small launch capability is a natural entry point, as I was already mentioning, but that's not, we're not fixating on that. That's only the beginning. And we do want to offer heavy launch capability in the time to come. As I was saying, we are interested in exploring orbital tourism, and ideally would like to go beyond and be one of the companies to pioneer transportation and development around the solar system in the future. That would be just amazing. That's my dream.
And I think with the rise of the nano and cube satellite game, they're very small satellites. You can hold them in your hand. And they don't last very long in the range that they are at. So there's a very high frequency of replacement, and therefore that drives the demand for small satellite launches. Traditionally, because of the way the industry has formed in the Western countries, the rockets are really, really huge. And it's such a waste to put it's very hard also to fill it up with all the nanosatellites, and that drives the demand for the nanosatellite launches or small satellite launches. Yeah. So do you have any, do you have to travel a lot since Singapore is a very small country with...
Yes, I do travel quite frequently. I've been to the States a couple of times this year already. I'm going to London in November for Global MilSatCom, which is a military satellite convention. That's the fun part. It's always great to be in front of people and share our vision and our dream. And I just hope to have more opportunities coming up in the near future.
But does it get very strange for you to be going to countries with very big budget, and then you're asking for not a lot of money in relative terms, and they try to figure out what the small sat game is?
Yes, so basically they are surprised just how cost effective we are. And actually, I've heard the opinion especially in the US quite often, that their own local small launch companies will be facing a lot of cost pressures from overseas. And well, we are the cause of it, I suppose. China plus us.
And when you look at the launch orbits, the orbit slots, launching from the equatorial also provides a lot of cost savings and efficiency. So that also helps, to be in this part of the world.
Yes. So basically, in order to achieve an orbit, you need to have a lot of horizontal velocity, and you get some free velocity from the rotation of the planet if you're launching eastbound. That rotational velocity is the highest at the equator, so you can launch substantially more payload. But between some latitudes, that it's not really causing much of a difference. The difference is in terms of inclinations, the direction that you can achieve. If you're directly over equator and you launch eastbound, you can be in an equatorial orbit, which has some advantages, especially to countries along low latitudes, because the same satellite can have a revisit time of 90 minutes, and that's a very cheap solution for those countries. And from equatorial launch sites, you can still launch into polar orbits, which offer global coverage, and that's where majority of the small sat market actually is right now. So, long story cut short, if you're at the equator, you can cover more market than from other places. Sorry, go to techie.
No, it's fine. We have time. What makes your startup stand out against other organizations?
All right, that's a very good question. One that investors keep asking me all the time, of course. So, you see, propulsion is a tricky subject because especially chemical rocketry is driven by thermodynamics. And you cannot really do much about it. You can improve propulsion a little bit, but ultimately the best strategy is to make it as simple as possible to reduce the cost and increase reliability. Manufacturing is another area which is explored by many companies. 3D printing is already very common in rocketry right now. There are multiple companies which are employing it for many components, and some of them, like, I think that was, no, not Firefly, another one. Yeah, but basically it's a pretty common thing right now. But we realized that the next big thing, the next big disruption in rocketry will be punctuality. At this point, launch vehicles are extremely susceptible to weather situations, to wind shears, to lightning, and we are working on making that our vehicle more resistant to that, so we can avoid unnecessary delays. Also, as I was saying before, we are working on a proprietary guidance and navigation system, which could potentially reduce the necessary airspace closures. If you think about it, I mean, assuming you don't actually blow up mid-air and you don't cause basically a debris field to be falling down, rockets don't occupy much space, and neither does commercial air traffic or marine traffic. There are a lot of empty gaps, and we are trying to make that work in terms of regular launch operations. So we will be getting in touch with the regulators to hear their views, and if that works, then we will be able to not just operate more frequently, which is very important in terms of small launch profitability, but also we might even be able to sell those subsystems to other companies worldwide.
That's a lot of things on your plate, Simon. I'm sure
yes.
you can do it. And in SST, like I say, we're very proud, that we've been part of your journey to inspire you to take this leap. And we wish you all the best. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. And I'm very grateful to be here. And I'm grateful to SSTA for your support and for your help so far.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.